Morning, sir, ma'am, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7th Brigade PME for today, being focused on combined arms. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by two distinguished speakers. Virtually, first will be Chief Joint Operations, Lieutenant General Bilton, and then after lunch we'll be joined by Major General Ryan here in the room. For those that are asking questions online, you will notice on your screen that there is a mobile phone number there. Please text your questions through to that number along with your name, rank and unit, all right, and then I will ask them from inside the room here, direct to CJOPS and then to Major General Ryan after lunch. I'll now invite Commander 7th Brigade, Brigadier Say, to open the occasion. Thanks, sir.
General Bilton, General Ryan, ladies and gents, including those that are online. Today's really an opportunity, or our 2nd Brigade PME session. We undertook a first one a couple of months ago where we started to get an understanding of what some of the other countries were looking at through Major General Donoghue as the commander of the Manoeuvre Centre of Excellence, and also bringing back down into the tactical level with Gary Mackay, talking about some lessons from previous operations. Obviously today we're very privileged and thankful to have two generals to speak to us about, with CJOPS, an understanding of the contemporary operating environment and some of the challenges as we go forward, and obviously General Ryan with what we're seeing in the Ukraine. But most importantly, out of both of those two speakers and the activities, what I've asked for is the lessons and observations in combined arms teams. That is the centrepiece of what we do as the 7th Brigade, moving through the advanced combat training serial, with culminates in Talisman Sabre in July next year, and as we then take ConFE responsibilities from 3 Brigade. It's all about combined arms, and that is what our Army is about. So today is an excellent opportunity to get some insights of what's going on, both operationally from CJOPS and obviously strategically in some other spaces from General Ryan, but importantly bringing that back down into the combined arms team. So looking forward to a great day. Please remain engaged, opportunity to ask questions, noting the experience and depth of knowledge of the two presenters that we have today. Thank you.
Good morning, sir, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to introduce our first speaker for today, Lieutenant General Bilton, Chief Joint Operations. Commenced his career in the Australian Army in 1983, and command appointments include time as Commander 7th Brigade, before being appointed as the Deputy Chief of Joint Operations and then later Commander Forces Command. In June 2019, he was promoted to Lieutenant General and is appointed as the Chief of Joint Operations and was recently extended in that post. Today, Lieutenant General Bilton will provide some insights into contemporary operations and how he sees that shaping the role of combined arms into the future. Sir, without any further ado, I invite you to address the members on the Cove. Thank you.
Brigadier Say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity. I apologise up front for not being able to be with you today. To be frank with you, I've just literally recovered from a period of COVID-19 myself and will come out of isolation as of tomorrow and back to work in Russell. So thank you for providing this medium as a means to speak with you. I do want to cover a couple of areas today. I think it's quite important that you focus some effort today in thinking about the lessons learned from Ukraine. And I know that General Ryan will speak to that. There's a body of work being done across the department to understand the implications of what's occurred there, what lessons are learnt there. What I'd encourage you to do with regards to thinking through the Ukraine situation is make sure you take a close look at both sides. One thing that I'd commend to you is look very closely at Russian reform of its land forces, in particular how it reorganised those forces over the last decade or so, and where there's been distinct shortfalls. There is, in my view, a significant amount to learn from that restructuring and reform program that the Russians put in place in the context of our own land objective force planning. One of the things that are noticeable is a very low or significant reduction, if you like, in manpower. Lots of platforms, but not necessarily the human capital and capability being built into those structures to enable those platforms as a combined arms team to be employed effectively. So I won't go any further into that, other than I think Mick will cover off on a range of things, but I'd ask you to look quite closely. There's some excellent articles and material out talking about particularly the Russian reforms into their BTG constructs and what they've done with those constructs and how perhaps they've negatively impacted on Russian operations. I mean, there's a range of reasons for the situation that's played out in terms of the Russian part of the campaign or the war in the Ukraine. So I'd commend looking at those lessons. The next thing I guess I'd talk to is just the current environment and some things I'd like, in fact, the whole of the Australian Defence Force to think about. We're in an era of much greater instability and insecurity globally. The epicenter of that insecurity, frankly, is now in the Indo-Pacific region. And whilst there are still a plethora of other problems that present as challenges for the ADF, including counter-terrorism in the Middle East and some of the instability that still exists in the Middle East, it's been really the changing strategic environment in the Indo-Pacific, the militarization of the region, led principally by China, and then equally Chinese expansionism into the Indo-Pacific and globally that has created a less stable, less secure environment. We are in a period of what many might describe as heightened competition. And so we've found ourselves forced into a situation, frankly, where we've had to shift our strategic emphasis from one that was perhaps focused and open to a broad range of global circumstances, things where we've been, because it's in our national interest, been prepared to make contributions. And we've been 20 years of wars of stability and capacity building in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. We now find ourselves needing to be much more focused on our own region. We're being drawn back into the Indo-Pacific, and as such, we're also being asked to think more carefully about our own homeland defence. And whilst it's not necessarily been as high a priority in the last 20 years, it's becoming a much more significant priority now, and we're being asked to consider as a department and an organisation much more rapid development, acquisition processes. We're being challenged right now to meet the potential threats that exist in the region. State-on-state conflict has not gone away, and the Ukraine is just another reminder. And you can see the tensions in the region playing out around situations in Taiwan. The Korean Peninsula still remains uncertain. Russia is almost playing a spoiler act in the Indo-Pacific as well. So whilst it has had to consume a large amount of its capacity to deal with the Ukraine, and the outcome of that conflict is unclear, it's still making significant investments by its standards in the Pacific region as well, which again causes more tension, particularly with the US, but equally with Japan. And if you speak to the Japanese, they're quite clearly, at the very centre of that nexus of North Asian challenges, be it the Korean Peninsula, being a recidivist Russia, be it an expansionist China. They're right on, if you like, right on the coalface of what's going on there. So for us, we've been drawn back into our own region. The recent challenges in the Southwest Pacific, if you like, the bells that have been rung around the Solomon Islands Agreement, just another illustration of Chinese expansionism, is testing us, and it's asking us to shift our thinking. How do we compete effectively? How does the military contribute appropriately to a whole of government approach that allows us to compete and make sure that we defend and protect and where appropriate, promote our national interests. We are interested in maintaining a rules-based global order. As flawed as it is, the current one works better than perhaps what's being proposed by others that wish to change it to suit their own ends. And so if you distill that strategic environment down into what does it mean operationally, what it means for us is much more active approach in our own region, building deeper relationships in Southeast Asia, building deeper relationships with countries like Japan, South Korea, India, Indonesia, all of the archipelagic states through Southeast Asia, shoring up our own backyard, keeping an eye on Antarctica. I mean, there's just such a broad range of things that we need to think about and be involved in, and providing a military effect to ensure that our own interests are being protected and promoted. And so for our ADF, what that means is a lot more operations, activities and actions inside our own region. And we don't have necessarily a great number of named operations, but we need to view everything we do in the region through the operational lens. We need to understand in competition that, when we go and work in the Southeast Asia or Northeast Asia, Southwest Pacific, we're conducting a rehearsal. We're understanding how to operate in that environment, who we're going to operate. We're conducting a reconnaissance of the region, deepening our understanding of the environment, the weather, the human terrain, the things that operate in and around the areas where we might have to find ourselves operating in crisis or conflict. Then we're also trying to build relationships such a way that we can maintain access, that we can continue to operate the region effectively, project power effectively, be able to conduct the very significant ISR program that we undertake, both in the air, the sea, through space and cyber. These operations are ongoing all the time to make sure our situational awareness is as clear as it possibly can be. And then, of course, we're trying to build readiness. And by doing the first three, we take that lens of adopting an approach where everything we do is operational, from a key leader engagement through to an exercise. Then we understand that we're building a better level of readiness within our own organisation to respond in crisis. We live, if you like, on a continuum. It exists from competition through crisis to conflict, and you can shift anywhere along that continuum at any time. And so there is a need for us to be able to respond agilely to the changing circumstances in the environment as well. And so it's led to deeper contingency planning. It's led to exercises that are more tied to rehearsing our exercise, rehearsing our aspects of our contingency plans as well. And then, distilling that down further, we get to a point where we've got to play in what I describe as 5 dimensions. So there are 5 domains that we have to be able to maneuver in and coordinate in. Each of them are different, but each of them are integrated and interrelated. So you cannot afford to operate today in a single domain and expect to win. You have to be able to combine the effects, not just of air, sea and land, but equally of space and cyber. And we have to become highly proficient at being able to do this. And if you like, to take the theme of this conference, integrated joint operations is just combined arms on steroids. It's an ability to properly understand what each component can bring to the fight, and then how to plan and execute operations that effectively integrate those things. You are ultimately seeking an advantage. You're seeking an advantage to then apply an effect to win. And, you know, we need to find ways that we can gain advantage inside domains. And we are seriously, frankly, from a military perspective, outranged and outgunned in many of the domains already, particularly the physical ones. So there is an amount of work here to do for us if we're going to be successful to be able to properly integrate. Now, you know, as in combined arms at the land with the land forces, it requires deep understanding of each of the components, but equally habitual relationships. It requires us to regularly work together, exercise this, and then operate in this environment. It requires an open mind, frankly, to be able to listen to what can be delivered and is required, frankly, in those other domains. And all of those things are then built, obviously, on a sound logistics-based basis. And none of this actually takes place without effective logistics. And, you know, anyone that's done any sort of operational explain to you that a sound logistics platform and what we describe at this level at JOC as setting the theatre is critical. Our infrastructure, our national support base, the ability to draw on it, to be able to force project and power project. All of these things are heavily reliant on our logistics systems, as are combined arms in the land space. You're just not going to achieve the degree of manoeuvre or the element of surprise without a level of sound logistics support. Now, there's a couple of things I think are relevant at the theatre level that are equally relevant at the tactical level that are important. And one thing I'd stress, and I think as an institution, we're still trying to get come to grips with or become more efficient at, and that is winning the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance battle. And a lot of effort needs to be put into being able to effectively apply an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance effect that enables as clear an understanding of the circumstances that you're confronting as possible. So a constant investment in ISR is critical throughout any phase of an operation. Equally, understanding that your adversary will be taking the same approach in regards to ISR. It's the application of deception that becomes particularly important as well. And this is both at a strat level, but equally at a tactical level, that any of your combined arms planning needs to be thinking through how do you achieve an advantage through deception? How do you maintain situational awareness? How is your ISR plan going to survive contact? And so there's a fair bit of work that I think as an institution we need to do to really better apply the ISR effect in the first place. There is such a distinct advantage that can be gained if your ISR plan is sound and executed effectively. Excuse me for a minute. So a lot of what you'll find we're asking of the services is focused this way. In competition, it's very much about maritime domain and air domain awareness. It's about access. It's about building those relationships that enable us to maintain access into Southeast Asia and the Southwest Pacific, that actually influences the activities that we ask the Army, Navy and Air Force to undertake. These things are connected through our theatre campaign plan, and we are seeking to achieve objectives through these actions. So when we send, in this case, Army units to go and do activities across Southeast Asia, there's a logic to them that ultimately culminates in us maintaining access and building the relationships we need to have to be able to, pardon me, in the worst case, operate in these areas effectively in crisis and conflict. So I've covered off on a range of different, I guess, strategic circumstances. If I drill down now into what sorts of things might be asked of the land force in the future, I think it's useful to highlight a couple of things that I think the land force needs to focus on. One is A2AD, and in defence of Australia, this a concept of the air-sea gap out sort of 1,000 nautical miles from the Australian coast is a 1987 concept. The way we're going to have to defend Australia is going to require us to operate a lot further forward of Australia to be able to deal with, disrupt, potentially defeat the sorts of effects that could be applied against Australia in time of conflict. Long-range strike is of particular concern in all domains. So the missile strikes from submarine ships, from aircraft, but equally from land-based systems at very long ranges from Australia, are all things that are of great concern to us, given our paucity of integrated air and missile defence capability. So the land force has a critical role in being able to control areas where these sorts of capabilities might be utilised against it. And A2AD, particularly in Southeast Asia and the Southwest Pacific, are clearly tasks that might be required in time of conflict of the land force. And you need to think about how you would project force forward, identify an area that you can present an A2AD effect around, and then presenting a dilemma for an adversary to have to try and break that down. Multi-domain strike is going to become a key, or Army is going to be one of the key forces in delivering long-range strike capabilities with the new projects that come into service over the next few years. We need to be thinking about the whole targeting enterprise now. I would argue that only the Air Force at the moment really has what I might describe as a relatively sophisticated targeting process, certainly at this operational and theatre level. Army needs to be thinking about how it's going to contribute and also invest in that particular enterprise. You can have all the weapon systems you like, doesn't matter how far they fire. If you don't have an effective targeting enterprise that enables you to do the systems analysis, determine the targets, strike, and then to do the BDA or the battle damage assessment at the end of that, then you're not really going to apply the weapon systems to their greatest effect. So there's a number of areas in the land force that are going to require rapid development from the Army. Equally, those capabilities are going to be critical in a A2AD construct. And I'd say to you that you need to be thinking about how are those protected and manoeuvred in a combined arms way, because none of these systems are going to be able to defend themselves on their own. They are going to require a combined arms capability to be able to keep them secure and enable them to provide that A2AD effect. So I think there's significant effort required. And Army, for those that may already be aware, I apologise for those that aren't, the Army is now the defence lead for multi-domain strike. And Army needs to grip that opportunity and basically milk it for all it's worth, because there is significant progress that the Army can help the ADF and Defence make if it implements and leads that particular capability suite effectively. So it's something for I think you to mull over and think about how you might be able to contribute to that. The projection of forces amphibiously is going to be critical going forward. We do a number of activities overseas, but there has been what I might describe as a reluctance to actually regularly deploy embarked forces on our amphibious capabilities. It's much more difficult, I must say, from the Joint Force Employers perspective than you'd think it would be. But we need to see those vessels, those LHDs, as being critical components of our ability to respond rapidly to emerging circumstances in the region. And if you believe that to be the case, then you need to embark forces on those ships, combined arms forces, frankly, that then can be employed off the line of march to deal with and maybe be our preliminary response to a stability circumstance or a more routine HADR response. But every time those ships leave Australia and deploy into the region, into the Indo-Pacific, they must have embarked forces on them. We must be able to deploy agilely off the line of march as we do other activities through the region. I think our government expects it of us. We've got to, as an organisation, be more culturally attuned and accepting of the fact that this is core business. And the land force has a really significant role to play here. Our ability to respond in a timely manner is also going to change our posture and disposition. And some of the force posture review activities are going to focus heavily on where our capabilities are located, how they come together, and how they're force projected in a timely manner to meet the range of likely or possible contingencies that might confront us. And so you've got a series of challenges into the north of Australia, and where we're postured at the moment doesn't necessarily set us up to be able to respond in the most rapid way to the range of threats that might be presented to us, given the capabilities that are being fielded within the Indo-Pacific. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've covered a fair bit of ground there. What I've tried to do today is just talk a little bit about the changed strategic environment, how we've shifted essentially from 20 years of stability, conflicts, and capacity building to one now that's much more focused on trying to deter, in the first instance, state-on-state conflict in our own region, trying to ensure that we're properly prepared to defend our interests and our nation. Where much of our work should be galvanised, frankly, by our lack of preparedness in 1939. There are parallels here to the current strategic environment. It's not exactly the same, but there are distinct parallels to what we confront in 2022. That should galvanise us to be much more focused on preparing ourselves for the worst case, making sure that we're as well equipped, well trained, and well prepared to fight if we have to, as we possibly can be. And so I don't think we need any greater motivation right now than what's happening in our own environment and the uncertainty that exists in our own environment. This rapid militarisation and the rapid Chinese expansionism into the region makes it pretty clear that there's an onus on us to be as well prepared and as ready for conflict as we can. Your business, frankly, as a critical brigade within our land force, is to be able to execute your tactical warfighting capability and in as effective a way as possible. And that does require significant amounts of training. It requires a real focused effort on warfighting skills. And I don't think we should be frightened to be saying this stuff now. We need to be as proficient at warfighting as we can be. And if you're going to achieve that end state, you need to be as good at combined arms as you can be. And if you distill that down further, what you need, frankly, is habitual relationships between units and organisations that fight together. You need to know who's going to drop the bombs for you, who's going to fly in support of you, who's going to to provide the long-range strike capabilities, who's going to operate your targeting system, who's going to apply your logistics support system that's going to enable you to fight. You've got to have an intimacy in those relationships that builds a level of trust, builds a level of habitual behaviour inside those constructs. And none of this is particularly new. What I'm reinforcing here is something that are frankly are age-old principles. The only really different part of it, frankly, is the different range of technologies and capabilities that are available now and our ability to draw on all of them. So there is a need to think carefully about how we're structured, how we're organised, what needs to be organically within a formation to enable it to fight, and then what expectations of formation should have, and the units within it of organisations outside of the formation to deliver support to enable them to be successful. And this is where understanding functions at the tactical level, at the theatre level, the responsibilities I have to a land-based combat commander, to deliver a range of theatre effects to enable them to be successful, and then equally the responsibility back at the tactical level to support the scheme of manoeuvre of the theatre commander. So the more we practice, the more we rehearse, the more we understand what's being delivered by others outside of our own area of expertise. All of that's going to help us be more effective in the fight. But please, if there's any need for a reason or a purpose, just look carefully at the strategic environment now and you'll garner it. It's pretty clear that we need to be as good as we've ever been as a land force and as an ADF at being able to warfight. I'll pause there and I'm happy to take any questions. Over.
Yeah, g'day, sir. So Ross Thomas here in the room. I'll ask questions on behalf of the audience. And the first one comes from Captain Jesse Wood from the 2nd 14th Light Horse Regiment. Noting your comments of the need to balance workforce with capability introduction and security concerns in our near region, how do you think we can best prepare current serving personnel for future conflict? And further, how can we influence culture or new generations to join the ADF despite the uncertain environment we face?
Yeah, there's a couple of good questions in there. Recruiting and retention being the last part of your question there. There is a body of work being done at the moment. I think our recruiting system will undergo a significant change. 296 days to bring someone into the ADF is unacceptable, and that's what it takes on average. The 6 to 8 week target that we're being asked to, or the new contract is being asked to deliver, is a much more efficient and effective way, and I think will in part meet the demands of the market, if I can call it that. There are people that are wanting to join the organisation that would like an answer in a shorter period of time than 296 days, and frankly, I think that's pretty reasonable. That doesn't really go to the heart, though, of the motivation of the individuals to join. And my view is that we, over the generations, we've been able to recruit people to our organisation relatively successfully. I think if we streamline the recruiting process, there's still a desire within a significant portion of our community to serve. Our responsibility, I guess, as the organisation, the group of people serving in the organisation now, is to equally engage the community on what we've got to offer. And your recent open day, while it sounds trite, is actually really important part of engaging the local community. Nobody, frankly, talks about our organisation better than our soldiers. And our soldiers are excellent ambassadors when they're put in circumstances like open days. And we do them all, pardon me, all too infrequently. And, but they're such an important part of engagement. So ongoing community engagement, encouraging our people to talk about what they do and why they do it is going to be important. Now, that doesn't cover off on retention, and I think this is the most significant challenge we've got. But equally, I think our focus helps here as well. And perhaps the last 3 years are not great examples of how you retain people in an organisation. We're in a difficult dilemma where we've become the solution to every problem that's confronted by the country. And that has taken away our ability to focus on our core business over the last 3 years. And we're really, I think, in a challenging period at the moment where we're trying to extract ourselves from being the long-term solution to problems like aged care, the other impacts of COVID-19, and returning back to core business. And it's the returning back to core business, demonstrating what we do, why we do it, and then the professionalism that exists in our organisation, the quality of our people, and most importantly, the quality of our equipment. Well, that's not the most important part. The people are, frankly, but the equipment part is important as well. We're a modern, vibrant, capable, well-educated organisation that's capable of applying its warfighting capability in a very effective way. And I think that's the narrative we've got to build on. That's the reason people join the Defence Department, and particularly the Australian Defence Force, is because they want to be part of that team. And so I think we've got some work to do around retention. Some of it's equally about how we construct careers. I mean, I could go into a whole raft of areas here, but it is time for us to make a concerted effort to improve our retention within our organisation, and that might require some quite radical changes to how we structure careers, where we ask people to serve, how we balance families and people. I think, the model of, a single breadwinner family changed in the 1980s. We've got to understand that in modern society, family, there's two breadwinners. We've got to be able to, in our structures, career structures, posting cycles, we've got to be able to manage that so much more effectively than we are if we're going to be successful with retention. I probably could go on far too long about that, but your other part of the question was about preparing our people, and it comes down to our training. I think we're in an interesting juncture at the moment with regards to training transformation, and the balance of training at the individual level and collective training within the Army. My view is that we should train an individual to the fullest extent we can before they arrive at the unit, an individual that's able to operate in a collective environment, and then joins a unit and becomes a part of the team and is integrated in the team, having received a comprehensive individual training package. And training transformation for me was more about not so much shortening courses, that it was really about being able to embrace technology, adult learning, being able to use online learning, and be able to enable people to be educated at their own pace. So something that's changed significantly within the Australian Defence Force in the last 20 or 30 years is the education level of our people. And it's a much better educated workforce than it was 30 years ago. And I can prove that just by giving you the numbers of people that have done Year 12, and then the number of people that have tertiary qualifications, The numbers are significantly higher, tens of percentage points higher than they were 10 years ago and much higher than they were 20 or 30 years ago. So if you've got a much better educated workforce on arrival into your organisation, then you've got to make sure your training system's designed to take full advantage of. And, that's what training transformation's about in my mind. And so there's a need to, there's a need for us to think carefully about how we more fully train the individual in preparation to join the team, and then how the continuum between individual training and collective training is designed so that we optimize what the individual delivers once they arrive into the team and into that collective training environment. And then, of course, we've got to be careful with what burdens are placed where in the training cycle. And I'm probably way outside my remit here because you've got Mick Ryan, one of probably Army's most, or one of Army's generals with the most knowledge about training that we've had in contemporary history. But I just think the continuum between the individual and collective training needs to be carefully managed as well. But a unit, in my view, whatever it is, should have the organic capability to be able to collectively train and deliver its collective capability. And so how it's structured, how it's organised, how we train people to join it, and then how it trains, the onus is on it to deliver its organic capability, and then it does that within a combined arms team environment. So fully cognizant of its responsibility to the combined arms team. Look, that was a long answer to a question that had about 20 facets to it, but I hope I made some sense. Over.
Thanks, sir. The second question comes from Lieutenant Colonel Mark Gilchrist, CO of the 1st Imp Battalion, here in the room. You spoke about the need for persistent ISR and the requirement to operate off the line of march within the region. Noting the security classification today, do you think we have sufficient intelligence access through the human terrain in our near region to enable your decision-making needs currently, or future multi-domain strike requirements? If not, what should these accesses look like?
Yeah, Mark, nice to, I'm not seeing you, but nice to hear from you again. I hope you're enjoying command. Look, this is a difficult question to answer on this means, and I've probably already skating on ice with a couple of my other comments. But look, what I'd say to you is no, I don't have sufficient counterintelligence and human capability. Both of those things are growing. We're not devoid of them. We just don't have sufficient capability. And I would argue that's at the tactical level as well as at the operational level. There are areas that we need to invest in. In terms of the ISR battle, I really think it's something that we've been deficient in for a long time. It goes back to my own time as brigade commander. I still don't think we were as proficient as we should have been in the space. And I'm not sure, culturally, maybe we need to think about it as a battle. You're winning information, and how you go about doing that at the tactical and operational level needs pretty thorough planning and wargaming to really appreciate, how you apply what are a fairly, and how you apportion what are a fairly scarce range of resources. Having said that, there's a pretty neat suite of resources available, but they are finite, and how you employ them to their greatest effect does require quite deliberate and thoughtful planning. And then how you integrate that ISR battle with your own manoeuvre plan more broadly, I think is a critical function for formation staffs to think through and work through if you're going to if you're going to tie effectively your ISR plan and your maneuver, if you're going to tie the two and your maneuver plan effectively. So I think, Mark, that's probably as far as I can go on this means. Over.
So the next question, also in the room, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Groves, CO1 Reg. In terms of reinforcing our nation's ability to shape the theatre in cooperation and competition, what can the Defence Enterprise do to improve the diplomatic lever of national power? Is greater cooperation with DFAT called for, more secondments, or other activities that might be more significant?
Yeah, it's a good question. I spoke at DFAT a year and a half ago now, and I was asked what if Defence had more money, what should it invest in? And I said we should invest in more diplomats. And it probably sounds a bit silly, but I think Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is underfunded, and I don't think we have sufficient representation on the ground across the region. And I think, in competition, diplomacy is critical, and the area where I think we're at our weakest is in the information domain. And so I don't think we're clearly communicating to the region, particularly the Indo-Pacific, exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it. Our narratives are weak. Our policy constructs, we don't think through sort of beyond the next year or so. We need to be thinking 10, 20 years out on how we build our policy. We're reluctant to work to a strategy, which I find bizarre. There are people in our policy environment that don't believe in grand strategy. But if there's no plan and no strategy, then you're kind of making things up as you go along. And I'm not sure, and you become obviously far more reactive to the circumstances. So I think investment in our diplomatic arm, asking them to give greater attention to longer term policy thinking, and increasing the footprint in the region, and asking them to think more carefully and perhaps develop more effective, proactive information operations to be able to take a greater stand or a stronger stand in the information domain, in my view, is an area that needs improvement and could be done quite quickly. One of the things about competition is about the narrative and what people do and do not believe. And we traditionally take a reactive approach, and unfortunately, others, our competitors, don't. And it's always much more difficult to make your point or communicate when you're doing it in a reactive manner. And so I think by investing, and it won't take a huge amount of investment, but investing in the diplomatic arm would help significantly in the information domain, and help us with longer term policy planning. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
So the next question comes from Major Tom Lacornu of the 6th Battalion. He's also in the room here. Accurate comments around the strategic need to project power afloat in the LHDs, but embarking our soldiers for months away from home and family will put pressure on what's already delicate situation in regards to recruitment and retention across the Army. Is there an opportunity to offer incentives like medals and tax-free incentives that we see on other operations for those embarked forces on those regional deployments?
Yeah, look, this is a good point. People would be away for home for potentially months, but equally it's the way we design the activities as well. So there is a potential option to rotate forces, flying and fly out. There are also potential options to tailor it in such a way that you're doing certain raise, train, sustain activities whilst you're on that on that amphibious activity or operation. So we're blending, and I think this is happening anyway, but we could perhaps be more deliberate in how we do it. We're blending raise, train, sustain, and operational effects. So to the point, how many days a year you're away from home is something we perhaps should monitor, and becomes a design input into how you put operations, activities, and actions together, how you design them. Now, I'll give you an example. The Navy, you don't do more than 70 days at sea, and without returning back to Australia now. And then inside that, there's a certain ratio. It's a 70-30% ratio to time at sea and time in port. So it basically factors in a respite requirement into the design. I think potentially the same thing can apply to how land forces might be employed. So you can work through the number of days. You have a limit, if you like, on the number of days that you might be in the field, on the sea, doing these sorts of activities, and you try and control the periods of time away from home through those sorts of mechanisms. So the Navy's got a set of examples there. Now, I'll be honest with you, occasionally I find those frustrating when you see opportunities to, see opportunities arise ad hocly or on the spur of the moment that your response to might be limited by those sorts of requirements. But equally, you're trying to have a sustainable system that enables you to employ the force in an enduring manner rather than just on the spur of the moment. So I think there are mechanisms here in how we design what our forces are doing, and that factor in personal well-being. The other incentives are interesting. I'm making a play at the moment to have a group of activities we do recognised as an operation, a named operation in the region. I don't know how I'm going to go, but there's a whole lot of benefits to having a construct of a named operation, including to your point about recognition. And I think some of the activities that are being done around the region, I'd argue, some of the work done in the Philippines is no less dangerous than the work that's being done in Iraq or Afghanistan in the latter parts of the conflicts there. So it's a matter of trying to work through our policy around recognition, but equally appreciate that the careers of people entering the Australian Defence Force now are going to be a story of the Indo-Pacific. That's where most of their effort and work is going to be applied over the next 10 to 20 years as they join our organisation. They're not, our careers, many of us in the room here and my own, have been characterised principally by East Timor and then probably Afghanistan and Iraq. But this next generation will be Indo-Pacific. So I think there is a need to shift in our understanding, and it is important to recognise what our people are doing. But by the way, also on domestic operations, and I think we've kind of worked through that in terms of recognition. But what we do offshore in the Indo-Pacific in competition, we are trying to work a construct that will enable the sorts of things that are described here. I think it's important to recognise what people are doing. And I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thanks. So the final question, noting your timings, speaks to relationships, and that's from CO6RAR Rich Nissel. We've historically had large numbers of regional countries send their junior officers and soldiers to undertake ab initio training in Australia, similar to the civilian university sector Colombo plan. However, in current circumstances, in the context of your CJOPS 4Rs, do we need to change the paradigm so that we are sending far more of our officer cadets and NCOs to regional military academies and schools, while also setting far higher benchmarks for language training at establishments like ADFA?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think we could make an effort to engage with more of the colleges in the region. The challenge will be the standards of education. And again, you've got General Ryan there, who has a deep expertise in this area, who will probably be able to give you a more coherent answer. But I think there's value in these engagements. I know I've seen them firsthand. You know, people that have attended Thai Staff College and then ended up as the Thai LNO in Timor when the Thais came and contributed to the interfence mission and the value of that. I see those relationships pretty regularly now, where we've sent people to different colleges, staff colleges or war colleges, and they go on and be DAs or assistant DAs, and I've seen great value there in the relationships being built as well. So I think there's an ability maybe to draw on the base that exists already in defence. I absolutely know the work of our teams on the ground already in places like the Philippines and Malaysia, the exercises that are being done. Garuda Shields are about to happen in Indonesia. When our people are on the ground and engaging, there's a massive dividend, and it forms the core of the relationship. Is that human to human interface we get when we do exercise or conduct those mobile training teams around the region. Language skills is a good one. I think, yes, I'd like to see us promote language skills, and there has been, I know at places like ADFA, encouragement for people to take on a second language, particularly those with an Anglo-Saxon background. So I've seen some benefits from that. The other thing I'd say to you is there's a latent level of capability in the organisation that's not evident on PMKs, but I know when I get around JOC and talk to the people that serve there and work in the headquarters, there's a huge number of them that speak a second language, and it's not formally recorded anywhere. But what I've found now is, having discovered this resource, then getting people away to practice those language skills. So, I have a private soldier, a corporal it is actually, that speaks Hangul, the Korean national language. So she now goes to the CPXs that we do twice a year so that she can develop her language skills. And there are a whole range of others, Japanese, Indonesian, we've got a whole range of them. Russians, interestingly enough, useful for the Ukraine. So I think, to your point, mate, I think further investment, maybe even formalising that to some extent, all has utility in my view. Is that the last of the questions?
Yes, sir. We'll close off there if you like.
Yeah, look, I would like to just make a couple of comments if I can, separate to the presentation. I'd just like to acknowledge the efforts of the Brigade, particularly over the last 6 months with the floods, the effort in northeast Queensland. I was obviously deeply disappointed with the politicisation of our contribution. The contribution in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales were characterised differently, dealing with two different bureaucracies. And New South Wales has a long way to go, frankly, to understand how to properly integrate the ADF. And the I guess the media eventually landed in the right space and asked the right questions around that construct, whereas Queensland has a much more well-rehearsed, better structured emergency response arrangement. So, and the ADF plugs into that so much more effectively. But you know, that was another 6 weeks or 7 weeks out of a training calendar that's already you know, been stripped of time for the last 2 years. So I just want to acknowledge the efforts and thank people for their leadership and the work that they did during that period of time. And then I also just want to say that we are working to get a much better balance with this new government on how the ADF's employed in these circumstances going forward. I think there are a number of lessons learnt that we need to, as I said, we should be able to respond in an emergency, but we're not the solution, the enduring solution to problems. And that's the process we're going through with this new government now. How much traction we'll get, we'll see. But I just do want to acknowledge what the work that people did on the ground. And then equally, I just want to highlight that in all of what I've said, there are a raft of opportunities. And I think, you know, a number of the questions have been about our people today. Our people want to get out and be involved in the region. They want to engage. They want to exercise and train with partners. This is part of our retention plan as well. And I accept there has to be a balance with time away from home, but I know our people would much rather go and exercise in the Philippines or Indonesia than go to Shoalwater Bay for the 12th time in a year. And there are a whole raft of opportunities for the services to get out into Southeast Asia and the Southwest Pacific. And what we need is just a bit of a mindset about how we blend raise, train, sustain and operational activity together to achieve the outcomes we require from both. And that's frankly a little bit of innovative thinking and sometimes a little bit of flexibility and agility. But I offer this to each of the services, and they're represented in JOC. There are opportunities for you to shape things and do things that meet your raise, train, sustain objectives, but might be conducted in an offshore activity. And I think that's frankly, the connection to that is a critical part to retention. But thanks, Mick Say, for the opportunity. I very much appreciate the chance to talk to the team. Over.
Sir, in closing, thanks very much for your time this morning, presenting to obviously the team here in the room, but also the broader audience through the Cove. Thank you very much for your insights and your advice moving forward on the operations and the role of combined arms and how we can shape that into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I just ask you in thanking CJOPS for his time this morning. Thank you.